At Blackstone Defense Facility in Nevada, where the most classified government projects hide behind layers of security clearances and concrete barriers, everyone knew Sylvia Gomez as just another face in a blue uniform. She was the quiet security guard who checked IDs at Gate 7, the one who never missed a shift, never caused trouble, and never drew attention to herself. For 3 years, she'd been invisible, exactly the way she preferred it. But on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, when armed terrorists breached the perimeter with military precision and government officials, Sylvia Gomez would prove that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody sees coming. What they didn't know was that behind those calm brown eyes and routine security checks lay skills that could dismantle terror networks with surgical precision. What they couldn't have imagined was that their just-base security had once been the ghost who hunted nightmares in places that didn't exist on any map. This is the story of how an invisible security guard became the last line of defense between a terror cell and catastrophic national security breach, and why legends sometimes wear the most ordinary uniforms. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sylvia Gomez had perfected the art of being overlooked. At 34, with shoulder-length black hair always pulled back in a regulation ponytail, and reading glasses that made her look more like a librarian than a security officer, she blended into the background of Blackstone Defense Facility with deliberate precision. Her uniform was always pressed, her equipment always spotless, and her demeanor always professional but unremarkable. The morning routine at Gate 7 never varied. Arrive at 0530 hours, conduct equipment check, review overnight incident reports, and begin processing the endless stream of personnel, contractors, and visitors who required access to one of the most secure facilities in the continental United States. Blackstone housed experimental weapon systems, classified research projects, and technology that could shift global power dynamics if it fell into the wrong hands. "Morning, Gomez," called out Dr. Patricia Williamson, the lead systems engineer, as she approached the checkpoint with her usual coffee and stack of technical manuals. After 3 years of daily interactions, their exchange had become routine small talk that helped pass the time during busy morning shifts. "Good morning, Dr. Williamson," Sylvia replied, scanning the scientist's identification badge with practiced efficiency. Her eyes automatically assessed facial features against the photo, checked for signs of duress or unusual behavior, and noted the normal stress patterns that characterized someone carrying heavy project deadlines. "Running the new propulsion tests today?" Dr. Williamson nodded tiredly. "Third round of modifications. The Defense Department wants results yesterday, but physics doesn't care about political timelines." She paused at the metal detector, emptying pockets with the weary efficiency of someone who'd repeated this process thousands of times. "How do you stay so calm dealing with all of us stressed-out scientists every day?" Sylvia offered a mild smile that revealed nothing about the psychological training that had taught her to read human behavior under extreme stress, to identify deception through micro-expressions, and to remain calm while processing information that could mean life or death. "Just part of the job, ma'am. Have a productive day." The interaction was typical of Sylvia's carefully maintained persona. Friendly but not personal, professional but not memorable, competent but not exceptional. She'd spent 3 years building this identity, constructing a life where her most significant responsibility was ensuring that identification badges matched photographs, and that metal detectors functioned properly. Security Chief Robert Patterson approached her station during the mid-morning lull, carrying his clipboard and wearing the expression of someone whose day was already longer than it should be. At 52, Patterson was a retired Marine who ran base security with military efficiency, but had never encountered situations that required anything beyond standard protocols. "Gomez, I need you to brief the new security personnel on gate procedures," Patterson said, reviewing his daily assignments. "We've got 6 rookies starting next week, and corporate wants them trained on our specific protocols rather than just generic security measures." Sylvia nodded, already formulating training approaches that would emphasize observational skills and threat assessment without revealing the depth of her own expertise. "Of course, Chief. I'll prepare briefing materials that cover badge verification, visitor escort procedures, and emergency protocols." What she didn't mention was that her understanding of emergency protocols extended far beyond evacuation procedures and lockdown measures. Hidden behind her mild demeanor was knowledge of counter-surveillance techniques, crisis management strategies, and threat neutralization methods that exceeded anything in Blackstone's standard security manual. Patterson continued reviewing his notes. Corporate's been asking questions about our threat assessment capabilities. Apparently there's increased chatter about potential security risks targeting defense facilities. Nothing specific to Blackstone, but they want all personnel to maintain heightened awareness. Sylvia felt familiar tension settling in her chest, the same alertness that had kept her alive during operations in places where heightened awareness meant the difference between mission success and body bags. But her expression remained professionally neutral as she processed information that triggered instincts she'd been suppressing for years. "Any specific indicators we should watch for?" she asked, her question sounding like routine curiosity rather than tactical intelligence gathering. "Standard stuff. Unusual surveillance activity, personnel asking questions outside their clearance level, equipment or vehicles that don't belong." Patterson paused, studying the perimeter monitoring displays that showed normal activity patterns. "Probably nothing to worry about, but corporate wants everyone sharp." As Patterson departed, Sylvia returned to processing routine gate traffic while her mind automatically analyzed threat indicators that most security personnel wouldn't recognize. The increased corporate attention to security risks, combined with generic warnings about defense facilities, suggested intelligence assessments that pointed toward credible threats rather than routine precautions. During her lunch break, Sylvia walked the perimeter fence line with the methodical pace of someone conducting routine inspection. But her observations went far beyond checking for damage or security breaches. She noted sightlines that provided surveillance opportunities, access points that could be exploited by determined intruders, and defensive positions that could be utilized during security incidents. The facility's location in the Nevada desert provided natural security through isolation, but it also created vulnerabilities that concerned her professional instincts. Limited law enforcement backup, extended response times for federal agencies, and terrain that could conceal approach routes until attackers were dangerously close to the perimeter. Her radio crackled with routine communications between security personnel conducting standard patrols, checking equipment status, and coordinating shift changes. The familiar chatter provided background noise that helped her assess normal operational patterns while she continued her seemingly casual perimeter walk. "Security 7 to base," came the voice of Jake Morrison, one of the perimeter patrol officers. "Completing Sector 3 sweep, all clear, no anomalies detected." Sylvia keyed her radio with the standard response protocol. "Base copies Security 7. Maintain patrol schedule and report any changes in status." The exchange was routine, but Sylvia found herself analyzing Morrison's voice patterns for signs of stress or unusual tension. 3 years of working alongside the same security team had taught her to recognize individual behavioral baselines, making it easier to detect when something was wrong even if the person couldn't articulate what they'd observed. As she returned to Gate 7 for the afternoon shift, Sylvia passed the main research building where Dr. Williamson and her team worked on projects that existed behind multiple layers of classification. The building's security measures were extensive: biometric scanners, electromagnetic shielding, and protocols that prevented unauthorized access to information that could revolutionize military capabilities. The afternoon brought its usual stream of personnel departing the facility, but Sylvia noticed increased nervous energy among the scientific staff. Conversations seemed more subdued, projects appeared to be running behind schedule, and several researchers looked like they'd been working longer hours than usual. Dr. Marcus Chen, the deputy research director, paused at her checkpoint longer than necessary while gathering his identification materials. "Ms. Gomez, have you noticed any unusual activity around the facility lately? Vehicles that don't belong? People asking strange questions? Anything that seemed out of place?" "Yaka." Sylvia studied his expression, noting stress indicators that exceeded normal project pressures. "Nothing specific, Dr. Chen. Is there something particular I should watch for?" Chen hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Probably nothing, but some of our research has been attracting attention from parties who shouldn't know it exists. Corporate security briefed us on maintaining operational awareness, but they were vague about specific threats." The conversation confirmed Sylvia's assessment that the increased security concerns weren't routine precautions. Someone with access to classified information was worried about threats that exceeded standard security protocols, and the vague nature of official briefings suggested intelligence assessments that couldn't be shared widely. As her shift ended at 1,730 hours, Sylvia conducted her routine equipment check and shift transition briefing with Kevin Walsh, the evening security officer. Walsh was competent but conventional, someone who'd never encountered situations that required improvisation beyond standard procedures. "Anything unusual during your shift?" Walsh asked, while reviewing the daily log entries that documented routine activities and minor incidents. "Normal traffic patterns, no security incidents, standard equipment function," Sylvia replied, providing the factual summary that characterized her professional reports. What she didn't mention was her growing assessment that Blackstone was becoming a target for threats that would exceed the facility's conventional security capabilities. Walking to her modest apartment in nearby Henderson, Sylvia reflected on subtle indicators that suggested increasing threat levels. Corporate security questions, nervous research staff, vague warnings about defense facility targeting, and her own instincts that detected patterns others might miss. Her apartment reflected the same deliberate ordinariness that characterized her professional persona. Modest furniture, generic decorations, and personal items that revealed nothing about capabilities she'd spent years developing in places that didn't exist on official maps. But hidden behind the unremarkable exterior were resources that most security guards would never need, and skills that most people couldn't imagine. That evening, Sylvia prepared for another routine day at Gate 7, checking weather forecasts and reviewing security protocols with the methodical attention to detail that had kept her alive during operations where preparation meant survival. But something in her professional instincts suggested that routine was about to be interrupted by circumstances that would require capabilities she'd been hiding for 3 years. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly beyond her apartment window, vast and empty under star-filled skies that had witnessed countless secrets buried in classified facilities. Tomorrow would bring another day of checking identification badges and processing routine gate traffic, maintaining the invisible profile that had protected her from recognition and responsibility. But change was coming to Blackstone Defense Facility, and Sylvia Gomez would soon discover that some responsibilities couldn't be avoided when American lives depended on capabilities that only she possessed. The invisible security guard was about to become visible in ways that would transform everything everyone thought they knew about the quiet woman at Gate 7. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The first sign of trouble came at 0347 hours on what should have been another routine Tuesday morning. Sylvia was reviewing overnight security reports when the perimeter motion sensors triggered an alert in Sector 12, the northeastern section of the facility that bordered undeveloped desert terrain. The initial notification appeared routine. Wildlife frequently set off sensors in the outer zones, and maintenance crews occasionally worked extended hours on equipment upgrades. Security Officer Danny Rodriguez, manning the central monitoring station, called out across the security office with mild interest rather than concern. "Gomez, we've got movement in Sector 12. Probably another coyote pack, but protocol says we need visual confirmation before clearing the alert." Sylvia acknowledged the report while pulling up the sector map on her terminal, automatically analyzing approach routes and sight lines with the practiced efficiency of someone whose survival had once depended on understanding terrain advantages. The motion sensors showed a pattern that didn't match typical wildlife behavior, too organized, too purposeful, suggesting human movement attempting to avoid detection. "Rodriguez, can you get clear visuals on the Sector 12 activity?" she asked, her voice maintaining professional calm while her instincts processed threat indicators that exceeded routine security concerns. "Negative on clear visuals. We've got thermal signatures, but the desert floor is still cooling from yesterday's heat, making it difficult to distinguish between legitimate contacts and false positives." Rodriguez adjusted the monitoring equipment, trying to enhance resolution on displays that showed indistinct movement patterns. "Should I dispatch patrol units for ground-level assessment?" Sylvia studied the thermal imaging while calculating response times and tactical considerations that most security personnel wouldn't recognize. Ground patrols would be vulnerable if the contacts represented hostile surveillance, but ignoring potential threats could compromise facility security if something more serious was developing. "Send Morrison on a standard patrol route that provides visual coverage without appearing to investigate specific activity," she decided. "Have him maintain normal patrol patterns while conducting enhanced observation of Sector 12. 20 minutes later, Morrison's voice came through the radio with controlled tension that immediately elevated Sylvia's threat assessment. "Base, this is Security 4. I've got visual confirmation of multiple vehicles positioned approximately 2 miles northeast of the perimeter. Vehicles appear to be civilian trucks and SUVs, but their positioning suggests surveillance rather than normal desert travel. Sylvia felt familiar adrenaline beginning to flow, the same physiological response that had prepared her for operations in places where surveillance meant imminent combat. But her voice remained professionally neutral as she coordinated the response. Security 4, can you provide vehicle descriptions and headcount estimates without compromising your position? Affirmative base. I count 4 vehicles, dark-colored SUVs and pickup trucks. Multiple personnel, but distance prevents accurate headcount. They're positioned with clear sight lines to our main facility, and they've been stationary for at least 15 minutes. Rodriguez looked up from his monitoring station with growing concern. Sylvia, should we notify Chief Patterson in corporate security? This doesn't seem like routine desert activity. Sylvia was already calculating escalation procedures while processing tactical information that suggested coordinated surveillance rather than casual observation. The timing, positioning, and behavior patterns indicated professional assessment of facility security rather than accidental discovery by civilians. Notify Patterson immediately and request priority communication with corporate security, she instructed. Tell Morrison to maintain observation but avoid direct contact. If the vehicles move toward the perimeter, I want immediate notification. As Rodriguez made the required notifications, Sylvia found herself shifting into operational mindset that she'd suppressed for 3 years. Her observations became more systematic, her threat assessment more comprehensive, and her tactical awareness more acute. The invisible security guard was beginning to remember skills that had once made her extremely dangerous. Chief Patterson arrived at the security office within 10 minutes, moving with the urgency of someone who recognized that routine had been interrupted by genuine security concerns. His expression reflected the tension of a supervisor whose experience hadn't prepared him for situations that exceeded standard protocols. What's our current situation? Patterson asked, immediately reviewing the monitoring displays and communications logs that documented the developing incident. Multiple vehicles maintaining surveillance positions northeast of the facility, Sylvia reported. Professional positioning suggests intentional reconnaissance rather than accidental observation. Vehicles have remained stationary for approximately 45 minutes, indicating sustained interest in our operations. Patterson studied the thermal imaging while processing implications that exceeded his normal security responsibilities. Any indication of additional activity in other sectors? Could this be coordinated surveillance involving multiple approach routes? The question demonstrated tactical thinking that impressed Sylvia, though she recognized that Patterson's military background provided context for assessing threats that civilian security personnel might miss. I've ordered comprehensive sensor review for all perimeter sectors. No additional anomalies detected, but coordinated operations often employed diversionary tactics. Morrison's voice crackled through the radio with information that confirmed Sylvia's assessment of professional surveillance. Base. Subjects are using optical equipment to observe facility activities. I can see reflected sunlight from what appears to be binoculars or telescopic equipment. They're conducting systematic observation of different facility sections. Patterson grabbed his radio with growing urgency. Security 4. Are subjects showing any indication of attempting to approach the perimeter, or are they maintaining current positions? Maintaining current positions, but their observation patterns suggest they're documenting security procedures, shift changes, and personnel movements. This looks like intelligence gathering rather than casual observation. The confirmation that subjects were conducting systematic intelligence gathering transformed the situation from routine security concern to potential threat assessment that required federal notification. Patterson immediately contacted corporate security, while Sylvia coordinated enhanced monitoring of all facility approaches. Corporate security is dispatching a response team, but estimated arrival time is 90 minutes. Patterson announced after completing his secure communication. They want us to maintain surveillance without engaging subjects, unless they attempt perimeter breach. Sylvia nodded while mentally calculating tactical considerations that went far beyond standard security protocols. 90 minutes provided significant opportunity for subjects to complete their intelligence gathering and withdraw before federal response arrived. If this represented preparation for future operations, allowing uninterrupted surveillance could compromise facility security substantially. Chief, I recommend we consider proactive measures that discourage continued surveillance without direct confrontation, she suggested. Routine patrol activities that make subjects aware they've been detected might prompt withdrawal while avoiding escalation. Patterson considered her recommendation while studying facility layouts that showed potential surveillance positions and approach routes. What kind of proactive measures are you thinking? Enhanced perimeter patrols using routes that provide clear visibility to subject positions. Maintenance activities near perimeter sections that subjects are observing. Activities that demonstrate security awareness without appearing threatening. Sylvia paused, choosing her words carefully. Make them understand that continued surveillance will be documented and reported. The strategy reflected psychological tactics that could influence subject behavior without triggering defensive responses that might escalate the situation. Patterson approved the approach while maintaining communication with corporate security about developing circumstances. Over the next hour, Sylvia coordinated patrol activities and facility operations that sent clear messages to the surveillance team while gathering additional intelligence about their capabilities and intentions. The subjects maintained their positions but modified their observation patterns in response to security activities, confirming professional training rather than amateur interest. They're adapting their surveillance techniques based on our security response, Sylvia observed. That indicates military or law enforcement training, not casual curiosity about government facilities. Patterson studied the evolving situation while coordinating with federal agencies that specialized in counter-surveillance and facility protection. Corporate security wants detailed reports on all subject activities, vehicle descriptions, and behavioral patterns. They're treating this as potential preparation for future hostile action. At 0615 hours, the surveillance team suddenly abandoned their positions, withdrawing rapidly toward highway access points that provided escape routes before federal response teams could arrive. Their coordinated withdrawal confirmed professional operation rather than spontaneous observation. All subjects departing simultaneously using multiple escape routes, Morrison reported. Movement patterns suggest pre-planned withdrawal procedures. They knew exactly how to extract quickly when surveillance became compromised. Sylvia watched the thermal signatures disappear from monitoring displays while processing implications that exceeded normal security concerns. Professional surveillance teams didn't invest hours in facility observation unless they were gathering intelligence for future operations. The timing, duration, and methodology suggested Blackstone had become a target for individuals with specific operational objectives. Corporate security arrived 2 hours later, led by Agent Sarah Mitchell, a federal investigator whose credentials indicated experience with domestic terrorism and facility protection. Her initial questions focused on documentation and evidence collection, but her assessment quickly shifted toward threat evaluation and protective measures. Ms. Gomez, your incident report demonstrates exceptional observational skills and tactical awareness, Agent Mitchell commented after reviewing Sylvia's detailed documentation. Your threat assessment and recommended responses exceeded standard security protocols significantly. Sylvia maintained professional composure while recognizing that federal attention might compromise the invisibility she'd carefully maintained for 3 years. Just following established procedures for unusual activity, Agent Mitchell. Documentation and communication seemed appropriate given the circumstances. But Agent Mitchell's expression suggested she recognized capabilities that exceeded typical security guard training. Ms. Gomez, I'd like to discuss your background and qualifications. Your handling of this incident indicates experience that might be valuable for ongoing threat assessment. The request represented exactly the kind of attention Sylvia had been avoiding since accepting her position at Blackstone. Federal interest in her background could lead to investigations that revealed information she'd spent years keeping buried. But the surveillance incident suggested threats that might require capabilities beyond standard security measures. As Agent Mitchell prepared her preliminary report, Sylvia realized that the invisible security guard might not remain invisible much longer. Professional surveillance of Blackstone indicated threats that could escalate beyond routine security concerns, and federal agencies were beginning to notice that Gate 7 was staffed by someone whose capabilities exceeded her apparent qualifications. The morning sun climbed higher over the Nevada desert, illuminating a facility that had become a target for unknown subjects with professional capabilities and hostile intentions. Whatever was coming to Blackstone Defense Facility would test everyone's abilities, but especially those of the quiet security guard who'd been hoping her dangerous skills would never be needed again. The revelation came 3 days later through channels that Sylvia hadn't expected but should have anticipated. Agent Mitchell returned to Blackstone with a classified file folder and an expression that suggested she'd discovered information that transformed routine background checks into something much more significant. "Ms. Gomez, I need to speak with you privately," Mitchell announced, approaching Gate 7 during the mid-morning shift change. Her tone carried professional courtesy mixed with the authority of someone whose investigation had uncovered details that required immediate discussion. They moved to Conference Room B, a secure facility normally used for classified briefings that corporate security had cleared for federal use. Mitchell placed her folder on the table but didn't open it immediately, instead studying Sylvia with the analytical attention of someone whose job required reading people who specialized in not being read. Sylvia Elena Gomez, age 34, hired by Blackstone Security 3 years ago with employment history at various private security firms, Mitchell began, reciting information that matched Sylvia's carefully constructed background. Standard security clearance, no criminal history, exemplary performance reviews, no disciplinary actions. Sylvia maintained neutral expression while recognizing that federal background investigations went deeper than standard employment verification. Whatever Mitchell had discovered would either confirm her cover identity or reveal information that could change everything. However, Mitchell continued, opening her folder to reveal documents that carried classification markings. Sylvia recognized immediately. "There are gaps in your employment history that don't match standard career progression patterns. Extended periods where your location and activities can't be verified through normal channels." The moment Sylvia had been dreading for 3 years was arriving with bureaucratic precision. Federal agencies possessed resources that could trace identities through databases that most people never knew existed, and determined investigators could eventually connect carefully hidden dots that revealed inconvenient truths. "Agent Mitchell, I'm not sure what discrepancies you've identified, but my employment history has been thoroughly documented through standard background check procedures," Sylvia replied, maintaining the professional composure that had served her through countless interviews where revealing too much could be fatal. Mitchell leaned forward, her expression indicating that routine denials wouldn't be sufficient for the conversation she intended to have. "Ms. Gomez, I've spent the past 3 days coordinating with federal agencies that maintain compartmentalized personnel records. Your employment gaps correspond exactly with classified operations conducted by units that don't appear in standard military databases." The statement hung in the air between them like an unexploded ordnance, dangerous and impossible to ignore. Sylvia felt familiar calculations running through her mind. Assess the threat, evaluate options, determine the least damaging response to interrogation that could expose information that remained classified at levels that exceeded Agent Mitchell's clearance. "I'm not sure what you're implying," Sylvia said carefully, "but if there are questions about my background, I'm happy to provide any additional documentation that might clarify discrepancies in government records." Mitchell pulled out a photograph that made Sylvia's carefully maintained composure waver for the first time since their conversation began. The image showed a woman in combat gear standing beside military personnel in an environment that looked like the Middle East, but with faces and location indicators that had been digitally obscured for security purposes. This photograph was taken 4 years ago during operations that officially never happened in a country where American forces were never deployed, Mitchell explained. The facial recognition software identifies the woman in combat gear as you, despite the fact that your official records show you were working private security in Phoenix during this time period. Sylvia studied the photograph while processing implications that extended far beyond her individual situation. If federal agencies were connecting her to classified operations, it meant either security breaches in compartmentalized systems or investigations that had been authorized at levels that exceeded normal law enforcement procedures. "Agent Mitchell, I think there might be some confusion about my identity or employment history," she replied, maintaining plausible deniability while recognizing that continued denials would become increasingly difficult to sustain. Private security work often involves travel and temporary assignments that might not be documented in standard employment records. But Mitchell was shaking her head before Sylvia finished speaking. "Ms. Gomez, I've been authorized to discuss classified information with you because current circumstances require candid assessment of available resources. Your attempt to maintain cover identity is understandable, but it's no longer necessary." The statement indicated that federal agencies had made decisions about Sylvia's status that would fundamentally change her situation regardless of her preferences. When investigators with appropriate clearances started discussing classified operations, it meant that bureaucratic wheels were turning toward outcomes that couldn't be stopped through individual resistance. Mitchell opened another section of her folder, revealing documents that carried classification levels that required special facilities and authorized personnel. 4 years ago, a joint task force conducted counterterrorism operations targeting networks that threatened American interests in regions where conventional military action wasn't politically feasible. Sylvia felt memories stirring that she'd spent 3 years suppressing operations in places that didn't exist on maps, targeting individuals whose elimination required capabilities that exceeded standard military training, working alongside personnel whose identities remained classified even from each other. This task force included specialists whose expertise in counterterrorism, surveillance, and direct action exceeded anything available through conventional military channels, Mitchell continued. Personnel whose operational records were compartmentalized to protect both national security and individual safety after completion of their assignments. The careful language indicated that Mitchell understood the sensitive nature of the information she was discussing, but also that current circumstances required disclosure that normally wouldn't be authorized. Sylvia recognized the bureaucratic approach that balanced security requirements against operational necessities. Agent Mitchell, even if such operations existed, discussing them would require clearances and authorizations that exceed normal law enforcement procedures. Sylvia replied, testing Mitchell's actual authority while maintaining deniability about her own involvement. Mitchell placed her credentials on the table, revealing federal authorization that included counterterrorism specialization and clearances that confirmed her access to information that most law enforcement personnel never saw. Ms. Gomez, I've been specifically assigned to this case because my clearances allow discussion of classified operations that might be relevant to current threat assessments. The revelation that current threat assessments included classified operations suggested that the surveillance incident at Blackstone was part of something larger than routine security concerns. Federal agencies didn't authorize disclosure of compartmentalized information unless current situations required capabilities that only specific individuals possessed. What current threat assessments? Sylvia asked, finally acknowledging that continued denials would be counterproductive given Mitchell's obvious access to classified information and federal authorization to discuss sensitive subjects. Mitchell's expression grew more serious as she prepared to discuss information that transformed routine facility security into national security concerns. Intelligence agencies have identified coordinated surveillance targeting multiple defense facilities over the past 6 months. The pattern suggests preparation for operations that exceed standard terrorist capabilities. Sylvia felt tactical awareness increasing as she processed implications that connected Blackstone's surveillance incident to broader patterns that indicated systematic intelligence gathering by hostile actors. How many facilities have reported similar surveillance? 17 facilities across 12 states, all conducting research or manufacturing that could enhance military capabilities if compromised by hostile forces, Mitchell replied. The surveillance teams demonstrate professional training and coordination that suggests state-sponsored operations rather than domestic terrorism. The scope and sophistication of the surveillance network indicated threats that exceeded anything that conventional facility security could address effectively. State-sponsored operations required countermeasures that matched their capabilities, and federal agencies were apparently identifying personnel whose backgrounds included relevant experience. The surveillance team that observed Blackstone 3 days ago has been connected to similar operations at facilities in Colorado, Texas, and California, Mitchell continued. Their methodology suggests intelligence gathering for future operations that could compromise multiple targets simultaneously. Sylvia understood immediately why federal agencies were discussing classified operations with someone whose cover identity had been carefully maintained for 3 years. Current threats required capabilities that matched those of the hostile actors, and bureaucratic systems were identifying personnel whose backgrounds included relevant expertise. Agent Mitchell, what exactly are you asking me to do? Sylvia inquired, recognizing that federal agencies didn't conduct this type of disclosure without specific objectives that required individual cooperation. Mitchell closed her folder but kept her classified credentials visible on the table. Ms. Gomez, I'm asking you to consider whether your current assignment at Blackstone provides adequate protection for assets that could be targeted by professionals whose capabilities exceed standard security measures. The question was a test, designed to determine whether Sylvia would acknowledge expertise that exceeded her apparent qualifications, while avoiding direct statements about classified operations that remained sensitive even with appropriate clearances. Agent Mitchell, if current threats exceed standard security capabilities, then appropriate resources should be deployed to address those threats, Sylvia replied carefully. Facility protection, requires matching defensive capabilities to offensive threats. Mitchell nodded, recognizing that Sylvia had acknowledged the tactical reality without admitting personal involvement in classified operations. Ms. Gomez, I think we understand each other. Current circumstances may require expertise that isn't normally available through conventional channels. As Mitchell departed, Sylvia realized that her 3-year attempt to maintain invisibility was ending through circumstances beyond her control. Federal agencies had connected her to classified operations. Current threats exceeded conventional security capabilities, and bureaucratic decisions were being made that would determine whether her dangerous skills would remain hidden. The afternoon shift at Gate 7 proceeded normally, but Sylvia found herself analyzing every vehicle, every visitor, every routine interaction for signs that hostile surveillance had returned to Blackstone. Professional threats required professional awareness, and the invisible security guard was beginning to remember capabilities that she'd spent years trying to forget. Whatever was coming to Blackstone Defense Facility would test everyone's abilities, but federal agencies had made it clear that some tests required expertise that only specific individuals possessed. The question was whether Sylvia would acknowledge that expertise before circumstances forced the decision upon her. The crisis arrived at 2,147 hours on Friday evening, when most personnel had departed for the weekend, leaving Blackstone Defense Facility operating with minimal security staff and essential research personnel. Sylvia was conducting her final equipment check when the perimeter alarm system triggered alerts from multiple sectors simultaneously, a pattern that indicated coordinated breach rather than single-point intrusion. Emergency lighting bathed the security office in red illumination as automated systems activated lockdown protocols that sealed facility entrances and initiated communication with federal response agencies. The alarm pattern displayed on monitoring screens showed systematic compromise of perimeter sensors in a sequence that suggested professional knowledge of facility security systems. "Jesus Christ," Danny Rodriguez muttered, staring at displays that showed breach indicators spreading across the facility perimeter like electronic wildfire. "This isn't random. Someone knows exactly how our security grid operates." Sylvia felt adrenaline flooding her system as tactical instincts that had been dormant for 3 years suddenly activated with crystalline clarity. The breach pattern indicated a multi-team assault using intelligence gathered during previous surveillance, executed with precision that confirmed her worst assessment of the threat they were facing. "Rodriguez, activate emergency communication with corporate security and notify Chief Patterson immediately," she ordered, her voice carrying authority that exceeded her normal security guard persona. "Tell them we're dealing with coordinated assault by professionals who've studied our defensive systems." The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Sylvia's movements became more efficient, her observations more systematic, and her decision-making more rapid as she shifted from routine security guard to operational mindset that had once made her extremely dangerous in similar circumstances. Kevin Walsh burst through the security office door, his usual calm demeanor replaced by controlled panic as he reported information that confirmed the scope of the crisis. "Multiple armed subjects have penetrated the perimeter at 3 different points. They're moving toward the main research building using approach routes that avoid most of our surveillance cameras." Sylvia studied facility maps while calculating tactical considerations that went far beyond standard security protocols. The attackers' knowledge of camera blind spots and optimal approach routes indicated intelligence preparation that matched military planning standards rather than opportunistic assault. "How many subjects total?" she asked, automatically processing information through threat assessment frameworks that most security personnel didn't possess. "Preliminary count shows at least 12 individuals, possibly more," Walsh replied. "They're equipped with military-style weapons and appear to be wearing body armor. This isn't some random break-in. This is a professional operation." Rodriguez completed his emergency notifications while monitoring communications that confirmed federal response was en route, but wouldn't arrive for at least 45 minutes. "Corporate security and FBI are dispatched, but we're on our own until backup arrives. Patterson's 15 minutes out." 45 minutes represented an eternity when professionals with military equipment were advancing on a facility that contained classified research worth billions of dollars and technology that could shift global power balances. Standard lockdown procedures might delay but wouldn't stop determined attackers with adequate preparation and equipment. "What's the status of research personnel still in the facility?" Sylvia inquired, recognizing that protecting civilian staff required tactical considerations that exceeded facility security. Dr. Williamson and her team are secured in the main laboratory conducting time-sensitive experiments that couldn't be postponed, Rodriguez reported. Dr. Chen and 3 research assistants are in Building C working on project deadlines. Total civilian count is approximately 15 personnel. Sylvia processed the tactical situation with growing concern. 15 civilians scattered across multiple buildings, professional attackers advancing on predetermined objectives, and security response limited to standard procedures that weren't designed for military-style assault operations. Rodriguez, can you maintain communication with research personnel while coordinating lockdown procedures? She asked, recognizing that conventional security response would be inadequate for current circumstances. Affirmative, but our standard protocols don't cover coordinated assault by multiple armed teams, Rodriguez admitted. We're trained for individual threats and routine security incidents, not military operations. The admission confirmed what Sylvia had recognized immediately. Current circumstances exceeded anything that standard facility security could address effectively. Professional assault teams required professional response, and Blackstone's defensive capabilities weren't designed for threats that matched military standards. Her radio crackled with Morrison's voice reporting information that elevated the crisis beyond routine security incident. Base, subjects are using electronic equipment to defeat our security systems. They've disabled perimeter sensors in sectors 4 through 7 and appear to be jamming our external communications. Electronic warfare capabilities confirmed that the assault team possessed resources that exceeded standard terrorist operations. Jamming equipment and sensor defeat measures indicated state-sponsored support rather than domestic criminal activity, validating Agent Mitchell's assessment of coordinated threats against multiple defense facilities. Morrison, can you provide visual confirmation of subject equipment and tactical formation? Sylvia transmitted, gathering intelligence that would inform defensive strategies. Affirmative. Subjects are moving in fire teams of 3 to 4 individuals each, maintaining tactical spacing and communication discipline. Equipment includes assault rifles, portable communication gear, and what appears to be electronic countermeasures equipment. The tactical formation and equipment described military operations rather than criminal assault, confirming that Blackstone was facing the type of threat that required capabilities beyond standard security response. Sylvia recognized that current circumstances would soon force decisions she'd been avoiding for 3 years. Chief Patterson arrived as scheduled, moving with military efficiency but wearing the expression of someone whose experience hadn't prepared him for coordinated assault by professional teams. "What's our current tactical situation?" he demanded immediately. Multiple armed teams advancing on research facilities using intelligence gathered through previous surveillance, Sylvia reported. Subjects demonstrate military training, equipment, and electronic warfare capabilities. Federal response is 45 minutes out. Patterson studied monitoring displays while processing implications that exceeded his normal command responsibilities. Our defensive protocols assume individual threats or small groups using conventional weapons. This looks like military assault requiring military response. Walsh interrupted with information that transformed urgent situation into immediate crisis. "Chief, we're receiving reports from research personnel that subjects have breached Building C perimeter. Dr. Chen's team is secured in their laboratory, but subjects are attempting to override electronic locks." The confirmation that attackers had reached research facilities meant that classified materials and personnel were in immediate danger. Standard lockdown procedures might buy time, but professional assault teams possessed equipment and expertise that could defeat most civilian security measures given sufficient time and determination. Can Building C laboratory security hold against professional breach attempts? Patterson asked, recognizing that civilian research personnel depended on physical barriers that might not withstand military assault. Negative, Sylvia replied, drawing on knowledge of security systems and breach techniques that exceeded her apparent qualifications. Electronic locks and standard security doors won't stop professionals with adequate tools and time. We need active defensive measures to protect research personnel. Patterson stared at her with growing recognition that his quiet security guard possessed expertise that wasn't reflected in her personnel file. "What kind of active defensive measures are you recommending?" The question represented exactly the moment Sylvia had been dreading, when circumstances would force her to reveal capabilities that exceeded her cover identity or watch American personnel face consequences that proper response could prevent. "Sir, current threats require defensive capabilities that match attacker sophistication," she replied carefully. Standard security response won't be adequate for military-style assault operations. Rodriguez monitored communications while providing updates that demonstrated the deteriorating situation. Dr. Chen reports that subjects are using cutting equipment on laboratory security doors. Estimated breach time is 15 to 20 minutes. 20 minutes until research personnel would be exposed to attackers whose objectives and intentions remained unknown but whose capabilities suggested they would eliminate witnesses and extract whatever intelligence they sought. Federal response wouldn't arrive in time, and conventional security measures were proving inadequate. Patterson made the decision that would change everything. Gomez, whatever expertise you possess that exceeds standard security training, now would be an excellent time to apply it. 15 American civilians are depending on our ability to protect them until federal response arrives. Sylvia felt the last barriers between her cover identity and operational reality crumbling as circumstances demanded capabilities that only she possessed. The invisible security guard was about to become very visible indeed. Chief Patterson, I'll need access to facility emergency equipment and authority to coordinate tactical response that exceeds standard security protocols, she said, finally acknowledging that some responsibilities couldn't be avoided when American lives depended on expertise that only specific individuals possessed. Authorized, whatever you need to protect our people. As alarms continued echoing through the facility and reports confirmed that professional assault teams were advancing on classified research materials, Sylvia Gomez prepared to remember skills that she'd spent 3 years trying to forget. The invisible security guard was about to discover that some capabilities couldn't remain hidden when circumstances required expertise that exceeded conventional solutions. The test had arrived, and everyone would soon understand that legends sometimes wore security uniforms and answered calls that others couldn't hear. The transformation began the moment Sylvia accessed the facility's emergency equipment locker, her movements becoming fluid and purposeful as muscle memory overrode 3 years of careful restraint. She retrieved tactical gear that most security guards would never touch: night vision equipment, communication devices with encrypted channels, and defensive tools that transformed her from routine personnel into something far more dangerous. Rodriguez, I need you to establish direct communication with all research teams and maintain constant status updates, she instructed while checking equipment with the practiced efficiency of someone who depended on such tools for survival. Any change in their security status gets reported immediately. Her voice carried new authority that made both Rodriguez and Walsh respond with automatic compliance, recognizing leadership that exceeded typical security hierarchy. Patterson observed the transformation with growing understanding that his quiet gate guard possessed capabilities that fundamentally changed their defensive options. Walsh access facility blueprints and identify all possible approach routes to Building C, Sylvia continued, strapping on tactical equipment that looked natural on her despite her 3-year history of routine security duties. I need to understand how these teams are moving and where they're vulnerable to interference. The tactical planning she outlined went far beyond standard security protocols, demonstrating knowledge of small unit tactics and facility defense that matched military training rather than civilian security education. Her systematic approach to threat assessment revealed expertise that had been carefully hidden beneath unremarkable professional performance. Ma'am, subjects have reached Building C main entrance and are deploying specialized cutting equipment, Rodriguez reported, monitoring communications from Dr. Chen's team. Research personnel are secured in the inner laboratory, but the outer security barriers won't hold much longer. Sylvia studied facility maps while calculating tactical considerations that would allow her to disrupt professional assault teams without escalating the situation beyond her ability to control. The attackers possessed superior numbers and equipment, but they were operating in an environment that she understood better than they did. Chief Patterson, I need authorization to implement active countermeasures that exceed standard defensive protocols, she said, recognizing that conventional security response would be inadequate for current circumstances. These teams are professionals, but they're counting on facing civilian security rather than tactical resistance. Patterson nodded without hesitation, trusting expertise that exceeded his own understanding of the situation. Whatever you think will protect our people, you have my full authorization. Sylvia activated communication equipment that connected her to frequencies that most security personnel didn't know existed, establishing contact with networks that could provide tactical support for operations that officially wouldn't be acknowledged. Her radio calls used protocols and code words that indicated access to resources beyond standard facility security. Control, this is Phoenix 7, she transmitted, using identification that hadn't been spoken in 3 years. Request tactical assessment support for a facility defense operation. Multiple armed teams, professional capabilities, civilian personnel at risk. The response came immediately through encrypted channels that confirmed her access to support networks that operated beyond conventional law enforcement. Phoenix 7, this is Control. We have your position and are monitoring the situation. Federal response is en route, but what do you need for immediate tactical support? Patterson and the security team stared at Sylvia with recognition, dawning that their quiet colleague possessed connections and capabilities that exceeded anything in their experience. The professional military communications she was conducting revealed an identity that had been completely hidden beneath routine security duties. Control, I need real-time surveillance of facility perimeter and tactical analysis of subject positions, Sylvia requested. Facility security cameras have been compromised, but I need eyes on target movement patterns. Stand by, Phoenix 7. Accessing satellite surveillance and redirecting resources to your position. Within minutes, Sylvia was receiving intelligence updates that provided comprehensive tactical awareness of the assault teams, positions, equipment, and probable objectives. The information allowed her to plan countermeasures that matched the sophistication of the threats they were facing. Rodriguez, maintain communication with research teams while I implement tactical response. She instructed, checking weapons that had been secured in emergency lockers for situations that exceeded routine security incidents. If their security status changes, I need immediate notification. Her handling of tactical equipment demonstrated familiarity that came from extensive operational experience rather than standard security training. Every movement was efficient and professional, revealing skills that had been dormant but not forgotten during 3 years of deliberately routine assignments. Ma'am, how exactly are you planning to engage multiple professional assault teams? Walsh asked, recognizing that conventional security personnel weren't equipped or trained for direct confrontation with military-style threats. Sylvia's smile carried confidence that had been earned through operations in places where hesitation meant death and tactical mistakes had permanent consequences. I'm not planning to engage them directly. I'm planning to disrupt their operation using advantages they don't expect civilian security to possess. She moved toward facility access points with tactical awareness that automatically processed sight lines, cover positions, and approach routes that could be used to observe and influence the assault team's activities. Her analysis went far beyond standard security considerations, demonstrating knowledge of small unit tactics that matched military expertise. The first countermeasure involved electronic systems that most security personnel couldn't access, but that Sylvia activated using credentials that shouldn't have existed in her security profile. Facility lighting systems began cycling in patterns that disrupted the assault teams, adapted night vision, while emergency communications activated frequencies that interfered with their tactical coordination. Phoenix 7, satellite surveillance shows assault teams responding to your electronic countermeasures. Control reported through encrypted communications. Teams Alpha and Bravo are adjusting positions, but Team Charlie continues advancing on research facility. Sylvia acknowledged the intelligence while implementing additional measures that leveraged facility systems against attackers who'd planned for conventional security response rather than tactical interference. Fire suppression systems activated in strategic locations, creating visual barriers and forcing subject movement into predictable patterns. Dr. Chen reports that cutting operations have stopped temporarily, Rodriguez announced. Subjects appear to be responding to changes in facility systems. The confirmation that her countermeasures were affecting professional assault teams demonstrated capabilities that impressed even experienced military personnel like Patterson. Her systematic approach to facility defense revealed expertise that exceeded conventional security training by substantial margins. But the tactical situation remained dangerous despite initial success. Professional assault teams would adapt to countermeasures and continue their operation using modified approaches that could overcome civilian defensive measures given sufficient time and determination. Control, what's the estimated time for federal response arrival? Sylvia inquired while preparing additional countermeasures that could buy time for research personnel to remain secure. Federal tactical teams are 30 minutes out, but subjects appear to be accelerating their operation timeline, quote. Control replied. Intelligence suggests they're aware of response time frames and are modifying their approach accordingly. 30 minutes represented significant opportunity for professional teams to complete their objectives and extract before federal response could arrive. Sylvia recognized that passive countermeasures wouldn't be sufficient to protect research personnel for the duration required. "Chief Patterson, I need to implement active defensive measures that exceed facility security protocols," she announced, recognizing that circumstances were forcing decisions she'd hoped to avoid. These teams won't be deterred by electronic countermeasures alone. Patterson studied her with growing understanding that current circumstances required capabilities that only she possessed among available personnel. "What are you proposing?" "Direct tactical intervention to disrupt their operation before they can breach research facility security," Sylvia replied, checking equipment that would allow her to engage professional assault teams using advantages that civilian security wasn't expected to possess. The proposal represented exactly the kind of operational involvement that she'd been avoiding for 3 years. But current circumstances meant that American personnel would face consequences that proper tactical response could prevent. Professional threats required professional response regardless of personal preferences about maintaining cover identities. "Rodriguez, maintain facility coordination while I implement tactical response," she instructed, moving toward facility access points that would allow her to observe and influence assault team activities. "If research personnel status changes or federal response arrives early, notify me immediately." As she departed the security office, Sylvia felt familiar clarity settling over her consciousness. The same operational mindset that had made her extremely effective during missions in places that didn't exist on official maps. The invisible security guard was disappearing, replaced by someone whose capabilities would soon become very visible to professional assault teams who'd planned for conventional resistance. Patterson watched her depart with recognition that Blackstone's defensive capabilities had just increased dramatically through expertise that exceeded anything in their normal resources. Whatever was about to happen would test everyone's abilities, but especially those of the quiet security guard who'd been hiding capabilities that could determine whether American personnel survived professional assault by hostile forces. The facility's emergency lighting cast long shadows as Sylvia moved through corridors she'd walked routinely for 3 years. But tonight her movement patterns demonstrated tactical awareness that matched the threats they were facing. The test had arrived, and everyone would soon understand that some capabilities couldn't remain hidden when circumstances required expertise that exceeded conventional solutions. The first direct engagement came at 2,203 hours, when Sylvia intercepted Team Alpha, attempting to breach the facility's main power distribution center, a tactical objective that would plunge Blackstone into darkness and disable most security systems. Moving through maintenance corridors that provided concealment while allowing observation of their approach routes, she positioned herself where decades of counterterrorism experience could be applied with maximum effectiveness. Team Alpha consisted of 4 operatives equipped with military-grade weapons and night vision equipment, advancing with tactical precision that confirmed professional training. Their leader used hand signals that Sylvia recognized from her own operational background, coordinating movement patterns that demonstrated familiarity with facility assault techniques. But they were planning for civilian security response rather than tactical opposition from someone whose expertise matched their own capabilities. Their approach routes assumed predictable defensive positions and conventional security responses that wouldn't challenge military-trained personnel operating with superior equipment and numbers. Sylvia's first action involved facility systems that the assault teams couldn't anticipate or counter effectively. Emergency fire suppression activated in strategic locations, creating dense chemical fog that defeated their night vision equipment, while forcing them into predetermined kill zones where her defensive advantages were maximized. The team leader's radio transmissions revealed confusion as their operational plan encountered resistance that exceeded their intelligence preparation. "Control, this is Alpha Leader. Facility systems are responding in patterns that suggest active tactical interference rather than automated emergency protocols." Through her encrypted communications, Sylvia monitored their frequency while implementing additional countermeasures that leveraged facility infrastructure against attackers who'd planned for conventional security response. Electrical systems cycled in patterns that disrupted their tactical lighting, while HVAC modifications created air pressure changes that affected their ability to use chemical detection equipment. Phoenix 7 satellite surveillance shows Team Alpha regrouping in Sector 5, Control reported. Their communications indicate frustration with facility defensive capabilities that exceed their operational planning. The confirmation that professional assault teams were struggling with her countermeasures provided tactical opportunity to escalate defensive measures while maintaining initiative that kept them reactive rather than executing their planned objectives. Sylvia moved through facility infrastructure that she'd studied for 3 years, using knowledge that exceeded standard security awareness. Her next action involved direct intervention using skills that had been dormant but not forgotten during years of deliberately routine assignments. Approaching Team Alpha's position through routes that civilian security wouldn't know existed, she implemented tactical measures that professional assault teams wouldn't expect from facility defensive capabilities. The engagement was brief but decisive. Using facility infrastructure for cover and concealment while applying techniques that matched military training, Sylvia neutralized Team Alpha's operational effectiveness, without revealing her position or capabilities to other assault teams still advancing on research facilities. Alpha Team report status came the transmission from their operational control met with radio silence that indicated successful disruption of their assault timeline. Professional teams depended on coordination and communication that couldn't function effectively when individual units were eliminated through tactical intervention. Phoenix 7, excellent work. Control acknowledged through encrypted channels. Teams Bravo and Charlie are modifying their approach based on Alpha Team's communication loss, but they're still advancing on research facility objectives. Sylvia acknowledged the intelligence while repositioning for engagement with remaining assault teams, whose modifications to their operational plan would require different tactical approaches. Professional adversaries adapted to countermeasures, but their adaptations created new vulnerabilities that could be exploited by defensive capabilities they couldn't anticipate. Team Bravo had reached Building C and was implementing breach procedures that would overcome research facility security within minutes, rather than the longer timeline their original plan had required. Dr. Chen's communications indicated that laboratory security barriers were failing under professional assault techniques that exceeded civilian defensive capabilities. Rodriguez, what's the current status of research personnel in Building C? Sylvia transmitted while moving toward engagement positions that would allow her to influence Team Bravo's operation. Dr. Chen reports that outer security barriers have been breached and subjects are advancing on inner laboratory positions, Rodriguez replied. Research personnel are secured in the core facility, but estimated time until breach is less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes represented minimal opportunity to implement tactical intervention that could protect research personnel without escalating the engagement beyond her ability to control the outcome. Professional assault teams possessed superior firepower and numbers, but they were operating in an environment where her defensive advantages could be maximized through proper tactical application. Sylvia's approach to Building C utilized facility infrastructure that provided concealment while allowing observation of Team Bravo's breach operations. Their tactical formation demonstrated military training, but their focus on research facility objectives created vulnerabilities that could be exploited through indirect engagement rather than direct confrontation. Her intervention involved facility systems that the assault team couldn't counter without specialized equipment they hadn't brought for civilian security scenarios. Laboratory fire suppression activated throughout Building C, creating environmental conditions that forced Team Bravo to modify their breach timeline while degrading their operational effectiveness. But professional teams carried equipment that could overcome civilian countermeasures given sufficient time and determination. Team Bravo's leader coordinated modified approach procedures that would succeed despite facility defensive measures, demonstrating adaptability that confirmed military-level training and experience. Phoenix 7, Teams Bravo and Charlie are coordinating modified assault procedures, Control reported. Intelligence indicates they're preparing simultaneous operations that would divide your defensive capabilities between multiple objectives. The tactical assessment confirmed Sylvia's recognition that passive countermeasures wouldn't be adequate for protecting research personnel against professional teams whose operational modifications could overcome facility defensive systems. Current circumstances required direct tactical intervention that matched the sophistication of the threats they were facing. Control, I need tactical analysis of optimal engagement positions for simultaneous team interdiction. Sylvia requested while calculating approaches that would allow her to influence multiple assault operations using advantages that civilian security wasn't expected to possess. Phoenix 7, facility infrastructure provides concealment for approach to Team Bravo position, but Team Charlie's advancement on Building D research facilities would require separate engagement, Control replied. Simultaneous interdiction would be challenging given current tactical parameters. The assessment confirmed tactical limitations that required prioritization decisions about which research personnel could be protected and which might face consequences that proper response could prevent. Professional threats exceeded individual capabilities despite tactical expertise that matched military training. But Sylvia's operational experience included situations where impossible odds required innovative solutions that conventional tactical doctrine wouldn't address. Creative application of available resources could multiply defensive effectiveness beyond standard calculations of personnel and equipment ratios. Dr. Chen, this is facility security, she transmitted directly to research personnel using communication protocols that weren't part of standard security procedures. I need you to implement laboratory lockdown procedures that exceed normal security protocols. Emergency measures that would delay breach operations beyond normal timelines. Chen's response indicated confusion about security capabilities that exceeded his understanding of facility defensive resources. Security, we've implemented all standard lockdown procedures. What additional measures are available? Sylvia's instructions involved laboratory systems that research personnel could activate, but that weren't included in standard security protocols. Emergency containment procedures designed for hazardous material incidents could create environmental barriers that would delay assault team operations while providing additional time for tactical intervention. Implement emergency containment protocols for hazardous material isolation, she instructed. Full facility lockdown using procedures normally reserved for chemical or biological incidents. Maximum delay of any unauthorized access. The laboratory modifications would buy precious minutes that could allow her to engage remaining assault teams using tactical approaches that maximized her defensive advantages while minimizing exposure to superior numbers and equipment. Professional threats required professional response, but creative application of available resources could level tactical odds that seemed impossible. As emergency containment procedures activated throughout the research facilities, creating barriers that would challenge professional breach operations, Sylvia prepared for direct engagement with assault teams whose capabilities matched military training but whose operational planning hadn't anticipated tactical resistance from someone whose expertise exceeded their intelligence preparation. Phoenix 7, facility modifications are affecting assault team timelines, Control reported. Teams Bravo and Charlie are encountering delays that provide opportunity for tactical intervention. The confirmation that our countermeasures were buying time provided tactical window for engagement that could protect research personnel while federal response continued approaching. But success would require capabilities that she'd hoped never to use again. Applied in circumstances where failure meant consequences that exceeded acceptable losses. Moving through facility infrastructure toward engagement positions that would determine whether American personnel survived professional assault by hostile forces, Sylvia felt familiar clarity that came from accepting responsibilities that couldn't be avoided when circumstances required expertise that only specific individuals possessed. The invisible security guard had become very visible indeed, and everyone would soon understand that some capabilities emerged only when conventional solutions weren't adequate for protecting American lives. The simultaneous engagement with teams Bravo and Charlie required tactical coordination that pushed Sylvia's capabilities to their absolute limits. With research personnel secured behind emergency containment barriers that would hold for perhaps 15 minutes against professional breach equipment, she implemented a strategy that violated every principle of conventional defensive operations, but maximized her expertise against superior numbers. Using facility maintenance tunnels that connected all major buildings, Sylvia positioned explosive charges at strategic infrastructure points, not to cause casualties, but to create controlled demolitions that would isolate the assault teams from each other while channeling their movement into predetermined kill zones where her advantages could be maximized. Control, I'm implementing facility modification procedures that will alter the tactical environment, she transmitted while setting charges with the precision of someone whose survival had once depended on explosive ordnance expertise. Teams Bravo and Charlie will be forced into separate engagement areas where defensive capabilities can be applied sequentially rather than simultaneously. The response came immediately through encrypted channels that confirmed her access to support networks operating beyond standard law enforcement. Phoenix 7. Understood. Satellite surveillance shows federal tactical teams are 20 minutes out. Can you maintain defensive operations for that duration? 20 minutes represented an eternity when facing professional assault teams whose modified operational plans could overcome facility defensive measures given sufficient time and determination. But controlled facility modifications would create tactical opportunities that didn't exist under normal circumstances. The first detonation severed the connecting corridor between buildings C and D, preventing teams Bravo and Charlie from coordinating their assault while forcing them to approach research objectives through routes that Sylvia could defend using interior facility knowledge that exceeded their intelligence preparation. RPS. Team Bravo's communications revealed confusion as their operational environment changed in ways their planning hadn't anticipated. Control, this is Bravo Leader. Facility infrastructure has been modified to prevent coordinated operations. Requesting guidance for independent assault procedures. Their operational controls response indicated growing concern about facility defensive capabilities that exceeded intelligence assessments. Bravo Team, proceed with independent breach operations. Charlie Team will continue separate objective assault, complete operations and extract before federal response arrives. The modified timeline meant both teams would accelerate their operations to complete objectives before federal tactical units could arrive, but their separation allowed Sylvia to engage them individually using defensive advantages that wouldn't be effective against coordinated assault. Her engagement with Team Bravo began in the modified corridors leading to Building C, where emergency containment procedures had created environmental barriers that degraded their tactical equipment while providing concealment for defensive positioning. Moving through facility infrastructure with the fluid precision of someone whose expertise matched military training, she implemented tactical measures that professional assault teams wouldn't expect from civilian security. The engagement was brief but intense. Team Bravo possessed superior firepower and numbers, but they were operating in an environment that Sylvia understood better than they did, using defensive positions that maximized her capabilities while minimizing exposure to their advantages. Her tactical approach demonstrated expertise that had been earned through operations in places where hesitation meant death, and tactical mistakes had permanent consequences. Bravo Team, report status. Came the transmission from their operational control met with fragmented communications that indicated successful disruption of their assault timeline. Professional coordination depended on effective communication and tactical formation that couldn't function when individual team members were neutralized through defensive intervention. Phoenix 7, exceptional tactical execution, control acknowledged. Team Charlie is accelerating breach operations on Building D research facilities. Dr. Williamson's team reports that security barriers are failing under professional assault techniques. Sylvia acknowledged the intelligence while repositioning for engagement with Team Charlie, whose modified approach to Building D would require different tactical considerations. Professional adversaries learned from observing defensive capabilities, and Team Charlie would implement countermeasures based on Team Bravo's experience with facility defensive systems. But her tactical modifications had created opportunities that Team Charlie couldn't anticipate or counter effectively. Emergency systems throughout Building D activated in coordinated sequences that disrupted their breach operations while providing concealment for defensive positioning that matched their assault capabilities. The approach to Team Charlie's position utilized facility infrastructure that provided multiple engagement options, allowing her to choose tactical approaches that maximized defensive advantages while maintaining operational flexibility. Her movement through the facility demonstrated familiarity with building systems that exceeded standard security knowledge. Team Charlie had adapted their operational plan based on intelligence gathered from Teams Alpha and Bravo's experiences, implementing countermeasures for facility defensive systems while maintaining focus on research objective completion. Their modified approach demonstrated professional adaptability that confirmed military-level training and operational experience. Dr. Williamson, this is facility security, Sylvia transmitted while observing Team Charlie's breach operations. I need you to implement emergency laboratory isolation procedures that exceed standard containment protocols. Maximum delay of unauthorized access using all available resources. Williamson's response indicated understanding that current circumstances required measures beyond normal laboratory security. Security. We're activating emergency protocols for hazardous material containment. Full laboratory isolation with specialized barriers designed for extreme containment scenarios. The laboratory modifications would create environmental barriers that professional breach equipment couldn't overcome immediately, buying tactical time for engagement that could protect research personnel while federal response approached the facility. But Team Charlie possessed equipment and expertise that could defeat civilian containment measures given sufficient time and determination. Sylvia's engagement with Team Charlie required direct tactical intervention using capabilities that she'd hoped never to use again. Their position in Building D provided multiple approach routes but limited escape options, creating tactical opportunities that could be exploited through proper application of defensive advantages. The confrontation demonstrated expertise that matched military special operations, with Team Charlie's professional capabilities countered by defensive techniques that exceeded conventional security training. Moving through the facility with tactical awareness that automatically processed sightlines, cover positions, and engagement opportunities, Sylvia implemented measures that neutralized their operational effectiveness while protecting research personnel. Charlie Team report status transmitted their operational control, receiving communications that indicated successful disruption of their assault timeline. The fragmented responses confirmed that professional coordination had been compromised through tactical intervention that exceeded their intelligence preparation. Phoenix 7 outstanding tactical execution, control reported through encrypted channels. All assault teams have been neutralized or significantly degraded. Federal tactical response is 10 minutes out. But Sylvia's radio monitoring revealed additional communications that indicated the assault operation included contingency measures that hadn't been implemented yet. Professional operations included backup procedures for situations where primary objectives encountered unexpected resistance. Control, I'm monitoring communications that suggest additional operational elements she transmitted while conducting tactical assessment of facility security. Primary assault teams may have been reconnaissance for larger operation. The response confirmed intelligence assessments that matched her operational instincts. Phoenix 7. Intelligence indicates possible secondary assault elements positioned outside immediate facility perimeter. Maintain defensive posture until federal response secures the area. Secondary assault elements represented tactical threat that exceeded individual defensive capabilities, regardless of expertise that matched military training. Professional operations included contingency forces that could overcome facility defensive measures if primary assault teams encountered resistance that prevented objective completion. Rodriguez, what's the status of all research personnel? Sylvia inquired while maintaining tactical awareness of potential threats that could emerge from approaches that hadn't been secured by facility defensive measures. All research teams report secure status behind emergency containment barriers, Rodriguez replied. Dr. Chen and Dr. Williamson confirmed that laboratory isolation procedures are holding against any breach attempts. The confirmation that research personnel remained secure provided tactical success despite circumstances that had tested capabilities beyond normal operational parameters. Professional assault teams had been neutralized through defensive measures that exceeded their intelligence preparation, protecting American personnel and classified research from hostile acquisition. But the mission wouldn't be complete until federal tactical response secured the facility perimeter and confirmed that all threats had been eliminated. Professional operations included extraction procedures that could allow hostile forces to withdraw with intelligence gathered through reconnaissance, even if primary objectives weren't achieved. Phoenix 7 federal tactical teams are approaching facility perimeter. Control reported. Maintain current defensive posture until area is secured and threats are confirmed eliminated. As federal response vehicles approached Blackstone Defense Facility, their emergency lighting illuminating the Nevada desert like electronic aurora, Sylvia realized that her 3-year attempt to maintain invisibility had ended permanently. Federal agencies would conduct comprehensive investigation of defensive capabilities that had protected American personnel against professional assault, and her role in neutralizing military-level threats would require explanations that exceeded standard security incident reports. The invisible security guard had saved American lives through expertise that couldn't remain hidden when circumstances required capabilities that only specific individuals possessed. Whatever came next would acknowledge that legends sometimes wore ordinary uniforms and answered calls that others couldn't hear, but they could never return to invisibility once their true capabilities had been revealed to protect those who depended on their willingness to exceed impossible limitations. Haleda. Federal tactical teams secured the facility perimeter as dawn approached over mountains that had witnessed another impossible defense conducted by someone whose expertise exceeded official recognition. The test had been passed, but the consequences of success would transform everything everyone thought they knew about the quiet woman who'd been checking identification badges at Gate 7. The federal debriefing that followed lasted 18 hours and fundamentally altered everything about Sylvia's existence at Blackstone Defense Facility. Agent Mitchell returned with a team of investigators whose credentials indicated access to classified operations that exceeded normal law enforcement parameters, conducting interviews that confirmed her operational background while documenting capabilities that had protected American personnel against professional assault. Ms. Gomez, Director James Harrison of the FBI's Counterterrorism Division, began reviewing classified files that painted a comprehensive picture of her operational history. Your actions last night prevented what intelligence analysis indicates would have been catastrophic compromise of classified research worth billions of dollars and technology that could shift global military advantages. Sylvia sat in the same conference room where Agent Mitchell had first confronted her about classified photographs, but the dynamic had changed completely. Federal agencies were no longer investigating her background. They were documenting capabilities that had proven essential for national security protection against threats that exceeded conventional defensive measures. Director Harrison, I responded to immediate threats using available resources, she replied, maintaining professional composure while recognizing that bureaucratic wheels were turning toward outcomes that would determine her future, regardless of personal preferences about maintaining low profiles. Harrison studied intelligence reports that documented the assault operation's sophistication and scope. Ms. Gomez, preliminary analysis indicates that the assault teams possessed capabilities that exceeded domestic terrorist operations substantially. Equipment, training, coordination, and intelligence preparation that suggests state-sponsored support rather than criminal activity. The assessment confirmed what Sylvia had recognized during the engagement: professional military capabilities that indicated threats exceeding anything that conventional facility security could address effectively. Federal agencies were apparently connecting Blackstone's assault to broader patterns that required systematic response rather than isolated incident investigation. Intelligence analysis shows connections between last night's assault and surveillance operations at 16 other defense facilities over the past 8 months, Harrison continued. Your defensive success at Blackstone may have prevented coordinated operations that could have compromised multiple classified research programs simultaneously. Agent Mitchell added operational context that demonstrated the broader significance of Sylvia's intervention. Ms. Gomez, the assault teams we apprehended possess equipment and documentation that connects them to foreign intelligence operations targeting American defense capabilities. Your tactical response disrupted what appears to have been preparation for systematic espionage and technology theft. The revelation that her defensive actions had implications beyond protecting individual facility personnel transformed routine security incident into national security success that would attract attention from agencies that operated at levels far above local law enforcement. Federal bureaucracy was recognizing capabilities that couldn't be ignored when similar threats might emerge at other facilities. Chief Patterson entered the conference room with expression that reflected recognition of fundamental changes in facility security requirements and personnel capabilities. Director Harrison, corporate security has completed preliminary assessment of last night's defensive operations. Ms. Gomez's tactical response exceeded anything our standard security protocols could have achieved. Harrison nodded while reviewing operational analysis that documented tactical expertise beyond civilian security training. Chief Patterson, federal assessment indicates that conventional facility security wouldn't have been adequate for threats of this sophistication. Specialized defensive capabilities were essential for protecting classified research and personnel. The bureaucratic acknowledgement that specialized capabilities were required for facility protection established foundation for discussions about Sylvia's permanent assignment status. Federal agencies weren't conducting comprehensive investigation only to return to previous arrangements that had proven inadequate when professional threats emerged. Ms. Gomez, Harrison addressed her directly. Federal analysis indicates that similar threats may target other defense facilities conducting classified research. Your demonstrated capabilities suggest expertise that could enhance protective measures for installations that face comparable risks. Sylvia recognized the direction of bureaucratic thinking. Federal agencies were identifying personnel whose backgrounds included relevant experience, while current circumstances required systematic application of specialized resources to address known threats. Her attempt to maintain invisibility had ended permanently through circumstances that demanded visible expertise. Director Harrison, if federal agencies are identifying systematic threats against defense facilities, then appropriate resources should be deployed to address those threats comprehensively. she replied carefully, acknowledging tactical reality without committing to specific assignments that would determine her future responsibilities. But Harrison was shaking his head before she finished speaking. Ms. Gomez, appropriate resources include personnel whose operational experience matches the sophistication of threats we're facing. Your background and demonstrated capabilities represent exactly the kind of specialized expertise that current circumstances require. Agent Mitchell placed additional classified files on the table, revealing documentation that connected her to operations that officially hadn't existed in locations where American forces were never deployed. Ms. Gomez, federal personnel records show assignments to Joint Task Force operations that conducted counterterrorism missions requiring capabilities that exceed conventional military training. The statement indicated that federal agencies had accessed compartmentalized records that revealed operational history she'd assumed would remain classified indefinitely. When investigators with appropriate clearances started discussing specific operations, it meant bureaucratic decisions had been made about her status that couldn't be reversed through individual resistance. Task Force Phoenix conducted operations in regions where conventional military action wasn't politically feasible but where American interests required protection against terrorist threats that exceeded local capabilities, Harrison explained, reading from files that documented missions that had never been publicly acknowledged. Hearing her former unit designation spoken in official briefings brought memories that she'd spent 3 years suppressing, operations where tactical excellence meant survival, and where protecting American interests required capabilities that matched the most sophisticated threats. Professional recognition was returning whether she wanted it or not. Ms. Gomez, Task Force Phoenix was disbanded 3 years ago after mission parameters changed, but current circumstances suggest that similar capabilities are needed for facility protection against threats that exceed conventional security measures, Harrison continued. The careful language indicated that federal agencies were proposing systematic application of specialized expertise to address current threats, rather than requesting individual cooperation for isolated assignments. Bureaucratic machinery was recognizing that professional problems required professional solutions. Director Harrison, what exactly are you proposing? Sylvia asked, recognizing that federal agencies had made decisions about utilizing her expertise, regardless of personal preferences about maintaining routine assignments. Harrison exchanged glances with Mitchell before responding with a proposal that would fundamentally change her existence. Ms. Gomez, we're establishing a specialized unit within the Department of Homeland Security that will provide enhanced security for defense facilities conducting classified research. Your operational background and demonstrated capabilities make you the ideal candidate to lead this unit. The offer represented exactly what she'd been avoiding since accepting assignment at Blackstone: return to operational responsibilities where tactical decisions determined whether American personnel survived professional threats. But current circumstances suggested that similar situations would continue arising regardless of her individual preferences. The position would involve training other personnel with appropriate backgrounds, developing defensive protocols for facilities conducting sensitive research, and providing tactical consultation for threats that exceed conventional security capabilities, Mitchell added. Consequently, Sylvia considered the proposal while processing implications that extended beyond individual career decisions. Federal agencies were acknowledging that current threats required systematic response using capabilities that matched hostile sophistication, and they were offering leadership responsibilities that could influence how other facilities protected American personnel. Director Harrison, if I accepted this position, what authority would be provided for implementing defensive measures that exceed standard security protocols? She inquired, recognizing that effective facility protection required resources and authorization that conventional security didn't possess. Complete federal authority for facility modifications, personnel training, and tactical response implementation, Harrison replied immediately. Whatever resources you determined are necessary for protecting classified research and American personnel against professional threats. The comprehensive authority offered indicated federal recognition that half measures wouldn't be adequate for threats that had demonstrated military-level capabilities. Professional problems required professional solutions with resources that matched the sophistication of hostile operations. Ms. Gomez, Patterson interjected, if you accepted federal assignment, Blackstone would request that our facility be included in any specialized security program you developed. Last night's events demonstrated that our conventional security measures aren't adequate for current threat environments. The request from Patterson confirmed that local authorities recognize the limitations of standard security protocols when facing professional assault teams. Federal expertise would be welcomed rather than resisted by facilities that understood the sophisticated nature of contemporary threats. As the debriefing concluded, Sylvia realized that her 3-year attempt to maintain invisibility had ended through circumstances that demanded capabilities she couldn't continue hiding. Federal agencies were offering recognition and authority that matched her operational expertise, providing opportunity to protect American facilities against threats that would continue emerging regardless of individual preferences. Director Harrison, I'll accept the federal assignment with understanding that current threats require systematic response rather than isolated defensive measures, she announced, finally acknowledging that some responsibilities couldn't be avoided when American security depended on expertise that only specific individuals possessed. Harrison smiled with satisfaction that came from successful recruitment of personnel whose capabilities exceeded normal availability. Outstanding, Ms. Gomez. Welcome back to federal service. 6 months later, the Specialized Facility Protection Unit had enhanced security at 47 defense installations across 12 states, training personnel whose backgrounds included relevant experience while developing protocols that matched contemporary threat sophistication. Sylvia's systematic approach to facility defense had created capabilities that protected classified research and American personnel against professional assault teams. The memorial service for the assault team members who'd been killed during Blackstone's defense was conducted with full honors that recognized their service to American interests, despite the classified nature of operations that had led to their deaths. Federal agencies provided recognition that classification restrictions had prevented during their operational assignments. Standing beside the memorial wall at the new Facility Protection Unit headquarters, Sylvia reflected on the transformation from invisible security guard to federal specialist whose expertise protected American assets against threats that conventional security couldn't address. The maintenance of routine anonymity had ended, replaced by systematic excellence that would continue protecting American interests long after her individual service concluded. Agent Mitchell approached during the memorial ceremony, carrying coffee and wearing expression that reflected satisfaction with outcomes that had exceeded bureaucratic expectations. Ms. Gomez, intelligence reports indicate that facility assault attempts have decreased substantially since implementation of your defensive protocols. Professional threats appear to be avoiding installations that possess specialized security capabilities. Sylvia nodded, understanding that systematic application of appropriate expertise had created deterrent effects that protected multiple facilities through demonstrated defensive capabilities. Agent Mitchell, professional threats require professional response. When hostile forces understand that conventional security has been replaced by specialized capabilities, they modify their operational planning accordingly. The federal recognition that had initially seemed threatening had evolved into opportunities that multiplied her expertise through systematic instruction rather than depending on individual performance. The Specialized Facility Protection Unit was creating sustainable capabilities that would protect American facilities regardless of individual career decisions. As evening approached over the Nevada mountains that had witnessed impossible defense conducted by someone whose capabilities exceeded official recognition, Sylvia understood that she'd finally found purpose that balanced professional expertise with systematic excellence. The invisible security guard had become visible in ways that protected American interests, through capabilities that would endure long after individual service ended. The promise was larger than personal recognition. It was commitment to ensuring that American facilities would possess defensive capabilities that matched contemporary threats. Professional excellence had been transformed into systematic protection that would continue safeguarding classified research and personnel whenever hostile forces attempted to compromise national security. Sylvia had built something that would outlast individual heroism, creating legacy measured in facilities protected rather than recognition earned. The quiet woman who'd once checked identification badges at Gate 7 had established defensive capabilities that would shield American interests from professional threats for generations to come. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.